The morning sun cast long shadows across the red rocks of Zirion Prime. 3 young Vasktar cubs crouched behind a boulder, their razor-sharp claws digging into the hard ground. Their fur was dark gray with black stripes, and their yellow eyes watched the creature grazing below them. It was a 6-legged beast called a thornback, covered in natural armor, that made it difficult to kill. Zeph was the largest of the 3 cubs. His shoulders were broad even for his young age, but his hands shook as he gripped his hunting spear. Next to him, Kira kept her ears flat against her head, a sign of nervousness among their kind. Thane, the smallest cub, had not even drawn his weapon yet. "Strike now," whispered Elder Huntmaster Gravik from behind them. His voice was like grinding stone, harsh and commanding. "The Thornback is not looking this way. This is your chance to prove you are true, Vasktar." The 3 cubs had been training for this moment their whole lives. Every young Vasktar had to pass the bloodmark trials to become an adult. They had to hunt. They had to kill. They had to bring back proof of their first successful kill and wear the blood on their foreheads as a mark of honor. But none of the 3 cubs moved. "What are you waiting for?" Gravik's voice grew angry. "Your families are watching. Your clan is watching. Will you shame them all?" Zeph looked back at the other adult Vasktar, who had come to witness the trial. His father stood among them, his face showing no emotion, but Zeph could see disappointment in his eyes. Kira's mother had her arms crossed, shaking her head slowly. Thane's parents were not even looking at their son anymore. "We should try a different approach," Zeph said quietly. "Maybe we could—" "There is no different approach," Gravik roared, though he kept his voice low enough not to scare the Thornback away. "You hunt. You kill. You prove your worth. This is the way of our people for thousands of years." The Thornback lifted its head suddenly. Its large ears turned toward their hiding spot. The cubs had lost their chance. "Useless," Gravik muttered. "All 3 of you are defective. How did our proud bloodlines produce such weak offspring?" The words hit the cubs like physical blows. In Vasktar society, being called defective was one of the worst insults possible. It meant you were not fit to be part of the clan. It meant you might be cast out to survive alone. The hunting party returned to their settlement as the sun reached its highest point. The village was built into a series of caves and stone structures that had been carved into the mountainside over many generations. Smoke rose from cooking fires, though the Vasktar only used fire to keep warm, never to prepare food. They ate their meat raw and fresh, the way their ancestors had always done. Zeph walked alone to his family's cave dwelling. His father was already inside, sharpening his hunting knives on a stone. The scraping sound filled the silence between them. 37 generations of successful hunters, his father said without looking up. Every male in our bloodline has passed the bloodmark trials on their first attempt. Every one. Except you. Father, do not speak. There is nothing to say. You have brought shame to our name. His father's claws scraped harder against the stone. You will try again tomorrow. And the day after that. Until you succeed, or until the clan decides you are too weak to remain among us. Meanwhile, Kira sat outside her family's cave, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. Her younger brother had passed his bloodmark trials 2 seasons ago. He was already being trained as a scout for the war parties that raided neighboring territories. Her older sister led hunting groups and had killed over 100 creatures in her lifetime. "Maybe there is something wrong with me," Kira whispered to herself. "Maybe I really am defective." Thane had it worse than the others. His family had already started treating him like he was not there. His parents spoke about him as if he could not hear them. "The clan leader says we can try to trade him to the mountain settlements," his mother said as she prepared their evening meal. "Perhaps they will find some use for him. Even if we cannot." "No one wants a Vasktar who cannot hunt," his father replied. "We may have no choice but to cast him out when he reaches adult age." The 3 cubs met in secret that night at a place they had discovered years ago. It was a hidden valley between 2 mountains where strange plants grew that existed nowhere else on their world. The adults never came here because there was nothing to hunt. I watched the thornback for a long time today, Zeph said as they sat together on a fallen log. It was just eating plants. It was not hurting anyone. I know, Kira agreed. When Gravik told us to kill it, all I could think about was how peaceful it looked. My parents want to get rid of me, Thane said sadly. They think I am broken. Maybe we are all broken, Zeph replied. But maybe that is not a bad thing. How can you say that? Kira asked. Being defective means we do not belong anywhere. I have been thinking about that, Zeph said. What if the problem is not with us? What if the problem is with what everyone expects us to be? The three friends talked long into the night about their fears and dreams. None of them wanted to hurt other creatures. None of them felt the bloodlust that was supposed to drive all Vasktar. They all wondered if there might be another way to live, though they could not imagine what that might look like. As the moons of Zirion Prime rose high overhead, they made a promise to each other. They would continue trying to pass the bloodmark trials because they had no choice, but they would also look for another path, even if they did not know where to find it. They had no idea that their answer would fall from the sky in just a few days. The crash happened 3 days after the failed hunting trial. The cubs were practicing with their weapons in their secret valley when they heard a terrible sound from the sky. Metal screamed against metal, followed by a thunderous boom that shook the ground beneath their feet. What was that? Thane asked, looking up at the smoke trail that marked the path of something falling from the sky. A ship, Zeph said. He had seen spacecraft before when traders came to their world. Someone crashed in the wasteland. We should tell the adults, Kira said, but her voice did not sound sure. They will just send a war party to kill whoever survived, Zeph replied. You know how our people treat outsiders. The three cubs looked at each other. They all knew he was right. The Vasktar did not welcome strangers to their world. Any survivors would be hunted down and killed as enemies. Maybe we should see for ourselves first, Thane suggested quietly. It took them most of the day to reach the crash site. The ship was smaller than they expected, about the size of their largest cave dwelling. It had torn a deep groove in the rocky ground when it hit. Pieces of metal were scattered everywhere. The cubs approached carefully, using all the hunting skills they had learned. Even though they did not plan to hunt anything, they could hear movement from inside the damaged ship. Something was alive in there. Should we go closer? Kira whispered. Before anyone could answer, a strange smell reached their sensitive noses. It was unlike anything they had ever experienced before. It was warm and rich, and made their mouths water, without them understanding why. What is that? Zeph asked, sniffing the air. The smell was coming from the ship. The cubs crept closer until they could see through a large hole in the side of the vessel. What they saw inside made them freeze in amazement. A creature they had never seen before was sitting near a small fire. It was much smaller than a Vasktar. With no fur and only tiny claws, its skin was pale with dark patches and strange coverings that were not natural to its body. The creature was obviously injured. One of its arms was wrapped in torn cloth, and it moved slowly and carefully. But what captured the cub's attention was what the creature was doing. It had a piece of metal over the fire with something cooking on it. Steam rose from the food, carrying that wonderful smell that made their stomachs growl. Is it changing the food somehow? Kira asked in confusion. The creature took some green leaves and sprinkled them over the cooking meat. The smell became even better. Then it took a white powder from a small container and added that too. Each time it added something, the food smelled different and more interesting. Why would anyone do that? Thane wondered. Food is food. You kill it and you eat it. The creature seemed to hear them talking. It looked up suddenly and saw the three cubs watching through the hole in the ship. For a moment, nobody moved. Elena Vasquez had spent enough time studying alien species to recognize dangerous predators when she saw them. The three young Vaskitar outside her ship had claws that could tear her apart and teeth that could crush bones. She should have been terrified, but something in their expressions stopped her fear. They looked curious, not hostile. Their body language showed confusion rather than aggression. Most importantly, they had been watching her cook instead of attacking immediately. Hello, she said in the common galactic language that most species understood. I am not here to hurt you. The cubs looked at each other with surprise. Few outsiders bothered to learn their language, and this creature spoke it well enough to understand. We are not here to hurt you either, Zeph said after a long pause. He was not sure why he said it, but it felt right. What are you doing to that food? Kira asked suddenly. She could not contain her curiosity any longer. Elena smiled. It was a strange expression that the cubs had never seen before, showing her small white teeth. But somehow it did not seem threatening. I am cooking, she said. I am making it taste better and easier to digest. But why? Thane asked. Food is already food. Elena realized she had an opportunity here. These young predators were asking questions instead of attacking. Maybe she could use her knowledge to keep herself safe. On my world, she explained, we believe that preparing food is an art. We can take simple ingredients and combine them to create flavors that are better than any of them alone. She gestured for them to come closer. Against all their survival instincts, the cubs found themselves moving toward the ship. See this meat? Elena said, pointing to what was cooking on her improvised pan. It is from a small animal I caught yesterday. By itself, it would be tough and not very flavorful. But watch what happens when I add these spices. She sprinkled more of the white powder over the meat. The sizzling sound grew louder, and the smell became incredible. The heat changes the structure of the meat, Elena explained. It becomes more tender. The spices add flavors that complement the natural taste. Together, they become something entirely new. The cubs watched in fascination as she flipped the meat over. The bottom was a golden brown color they had never seen on food before. Try this, Elena said, cutting off a small piece and offering it to Zeph. Every lesson of his childhood told him not to accept food from a stranger. Every instinct warned him that this could be a trap, but the smell was so wonderful that he found himself reaching out with his claws to take the offered piece. The moment the cooked meat touched his tongue, Zeph's world changed. The flavors exploded in his mouth in ways he had never imagined possible. The meat was tender and juicy, but also had tastes that seemed to dance and play with each other. It was like discovering a completely new sense. This is, he began, then stopped because he had no words for what he was experiencing. Good? Elena asked, smiling again. More than good, Zeph said softly. It is like music for the mouth. Elena laughed, a sound the cubs had never heard before but somehow knew was happy. Would you like to learn how to do this? She asked. The three cubs looked at each other. They knew they should return to their clan and report the crashed ship. They knew they were breaking every rule by talking to this stranger, but they also knew that they had just discovered something that changed everything they thought they understood about the world. Yes, Kira said before the others could stop her. We want to learn. And so began the secret lessons that would transform three failed hunters into something their people had never seen before. For 2 weeks, the cubs lived double lives. During the day, they continued their hunting training with Elder Gravik, failing again and again to make their first kill. But every evening, they slipped away to Elena's crash site to learn about cooking. Elena had managed to repair her communication device enough to call for rescue. But she told the cubs that help would not come for at least a month. She seemed happy to have the extra time to study their culture, and they were grateful for every lesson she could teach them. Cooking is about understanding your ingredients, Elena explained as she showed them how to identify edible plants in the area around the crash site. This root is very bitter when raw, but if you roast it slowly, the bitterness becomes a pleasant sharpness that goes well with meat. Thane was the first to really understand what she meant. His small size meant he had always been better at finding food than hunting it. He discovered that his sensitive nose could detect which plants were ripe and which ones were past their best. This herb smells like flowers, he said, holding up a purple leaf he had found. But there is something else underneath. Something that makes my mouth tingle. 1. Excellent observation, Elena said. That tingling means it has natural oils that will add complexity to any dish. Try just a tiny piece. Thane bit into the leaf carefully. His eyes widened as the flavors hit his tongue. It is like sunshine and thunder at the same time. Thane bit into the leaf, Elena laughed at his description, but she understood what he meant. The herb had both bright, cheerful notes and deeper, more powerful undertones. Kira showed a talent for understanding heat and timing. Her predator instincts, which had failed her in hunting, proved perfect for knowing exactly when to turn meat or when to add ingredients to a cooking mixture. How do you know when it is ready? Zeph asked as he watched Kira tend a piece of meat over Elena's cooking fire. I listen, Kira said. The sizzling sound changes when the meat is cooked on one side. And I can smell when the outside is done, but the inside is still tender. She flipped the meat with perfect timing. The bottom was golden brown with darker edges, exactly the way Elena had taught them. Zeph's gift was in combining flavors. He could taste a small amount of something and immediately know what would make it better. Elena watched in amazement as he created combinations she had never thought to try. What made you think to mix those 3 spices together? She asked after tasting a seasoning blend he had created. They wanted to be together, Zeph said, though he realized how strange that sounded. When I smelled them separately, I could hear how they would sound as a group. Elena nodded thoughtfully. Many of the best chefs on my world talk about food in musical terms. You have a natural gift. The cubs learned that cooking was not just about making food taste better. Elena taught them about the culture behind the meals she prepared. On Earth, she said, as she showed them how to make a simple soup, families gather around the table to share food and stories. We have special meals for celebrations and different foods for sad times that help comfort us. You eat together? Kira asked, all at the same time. Of course. Sharing a meal is one of the most important human activities. It brings people closer together. The cubs found this idea fascinating. Vasktar typically ate alone or in small groups, simply consuming their food quickly and efficiently. The idea of making eating into a social event was completely foreign to them. Could we try that? Thane asked shyly. Eating together like humans do? Elena smiled. I would love to share a proper meal with you. That evening, they prepared their first real feast together. Zeph had caught a small game animal using traps instead of hunting weapons, something he felt much better about. Kira cooked it perfectly, using timing skills that amazed even Elena. Thane had gathered various plants and roots that complemented the meat beautifully. They sat around Elena's cooking fire as the sun set, sharing the meal they had created together. For the first time in their lives, the cubs experienced the joy of eating as a social activity. This feels right, Zeph said as he savored a perfectly cooked piece of meat. This feels like what eating should be. I understand now why your people make cooking so important, Kira added. It is not just about the food. It is about caring for each other. Elena watched the 3 young predators enjoying their meal and felt her heart warm. She had studied many species across the galaxy, but she had never seen anything quite like this transformation. There is something I want to teach you, she said as they finished eating. On Earth, we have a tradition. When someone cooks for you, you thank them. And when you cook for someone else, it is a way of showing that you care about them. The cubs looked confused. But we all cooked this meal together, Thane said. Exactly, Elena replied. You cooked for each other. You showed that you care about each other. The simple statement hit the cubs like a revelation. They had never thought about preparing food as an act of caring. But now they could see that it was exactly that. Every careful seasoning, every perfect timing, every thoughtful combination was a way of giving something good to someone else. Is this why you are teaching us? Kira asked. Elena nodded. I have spent my career studying how different species share food and culture. But you 3 are the first aliens who have truly wanted to learn, not just trade or negotiate. Yes, I care about you. Over the following days, the cubs threw themselves into learning everything Elena could teach them. They experimented with local ingredients, creating dishes that combined human techniques with Vasktar preferences. They discovered that their enhanced senses actually made them better cooks than most species. They could detect subtle changes in smell that told them exactly how their food was progressing. But more importantly, they discovered joy. For the first time in their lives, They had found something they were naturally good at, and that made them happy. The stress and shame of their failed hunting trials began to fade as they realized they had talents their people had never recognized. "I want to cook for my family," Thane said one evening as they shared another meal together. "I want to show them that I am not defective. I am just different." "That sounds wonderful," Elena said. "But you should be careful. Your people might not understand at first." "We will make them understand," Zeph said with determination. "We will show them that there is more than one way to be strong." They had no idea how soon they would be forced to prove that strength. The trouble began when Thane made a mistake. He had been so excited about a new seasoning blend he had created that he forgot to wash it off his claws before returning to the settlement. The smell of herbs and spices clung to his fur like a confession of guilt. "What is that stench?" his father demanded when Thane entered their cave dwelling. "You smell like plants and smoke." Thane tried to think of an explanation, but his father's nose was too sharp. "You have been near fire?" his father continued, moving closer to sniff at his son. "And these scents, they are not natural. What have you been doing?" Before Thane could answer, his father's claws shot out and grabbed him by the shoulders. "Tell me the truth, cub. Where have you been going every evening?" The questioning grew more intense when other adults were called in. Elder Gravik arrived with several senior hunters, their expressions grim and suspicious. They could all smell the evidence on Thane's fur. "This is not the smell of proper hunting," Gravik said, his voice like grinding stone. "This is something else. Something wrong." Under pressure from the adults, Thane finally broke down and told them about Elena and the cooking lessons. The reaction was immediate and violent. "You have been contaminated by an alien," Gravik roared. "You have learned unnatural practices from an enemy of our people." "She is not an enemy," Thane protested. "She is kind. She teaches us to create instead of destroy." "Create?" Gravik's laugh was harsh and mocking. "We are Vasktar. We are predators. We take what we need and we dominate the weak. We do not create things like some soft-skinned prey species." The news spread through the settlement like wildfire. By morning, everyone knew that 3 of their cubs had been corrupted by human influence. The reaction was exactly what the cubs had feared. Their families were ashamed and angry. "How could you betray everything we stand for?" Zeph's father demanded. "How could you choose weakness over strength?" "It is not weakness," Zeph replied, though his voice shook. "Cooking requires skill and knowledge, and—" "Silence," his father roared. "You will lead us to this human immediately. You will watch as we correct this mistake." A hunting party was assembled within hours. Gravik led 15 of the finest warriors in the settlement, all armed and ready for blood. The 3 cubs were forced to guide them to the crash site, though their hearts were heavy with guilt and fear. "Please," Kira begged as they traveled. "Elena has done nothing wrong. She only taught us about her culture." "That is exactly the problem," Gravik replied coldly. "She has poisoned your minds with foreign ideas. She has made you forget what it means to be Vasktar." When they reached the crash site, Elena was preparing what she thought might be her final meal. Her rescue ship had sent word that they would arrive within days, and she wanted to create something special to thank the cubs for their friendship. She looked up from her cooking fire to see 15 adult Vasktar surrounding her hiding place. Their weapons were drawn, and their expressions were murderous. Behind them, she could see Zeph, Kira, and Thane looking terrified and ashamed. "So," Gravik said, stepping forward with his hunting spear ready. "You are the creature that has corrupted our young." Elena stood slowly, keeping her hands visible and non-threatening. "I have only shared my knowledge with them. They wanted to learn." "You have taught them weakness," Gravik spat. "You have made them forget their nature as hunters and killers." "I have taught them to create instead of destroy," Elena replied calmly. "I have shown them that there are many kinds of strength." Gravik's laugh was cruel. "There is only one kind of strength that matters. The strength to take what you want and eliminate your enemies." He raised his spear. "Cubs, you will prove your loyalty to your people by killing this alien yourself." Now, the 3 cubs looked at each other in horror. Everything they had feared was happening. No, Zeph said quietly. What did you say? Gravik's voice was dangerous. No, Zeph repeated, louder this time. We will not kill Elena. She has done nothing but show us kindness. She has made us better, Kira added, finding her courage. She has taught us things that make us happy. She has shown us that we are not defective, Thane said, his voice growing stronger. We are just different. Gravik's fury was terrible to see. Then you have chosen your side. You have chosen to betray your own species for an alien. Very well. We will kill her ourselves, and then we will decide what to do with traitors. But Elena stepped forward before any of the warriors could move. Wait, she said. Before you pass judgment on what I have taught them, let me show you what they have learned. We do not care what tricks, Gravik began. Are you afraid to see what they can do? Elena interrupted. Are you afraid that their new skills might be impressive? The challenge hit its mark. No Vasktar warrior could be accused of fear without responding. Show us then, Gravik growled. Show us these skills that are supposed to be so valuable. Elena turned to her cooking fire, where she had been preparing ingredients for her farewell meal. Cubs, will you help me prepare a feast for your elders? Despite their fear, the 3 cubs moved to help her. Their hands shook, but they began to work with the confidence Elena had taught them. They prepared the meats and vegetables, seasoned them with careful precision, and cooked them using all the techniques they had learned. The adult Vasktar watched suspiciously, but Elena could see their noses twitching as the aromas began to rise from the cooking food. Despite their hostility, they were clearly affected by the smells. Cooking is not just about making food, Elena explained as the cubs worked. It requires patience, timing, and deep knowledge of your ingredients. It requires understanding how different elements work together. These skills are the same ones that make a great hunter, but directed toward creation instead of destruction. As the meal neared completion, she could see some of the adults beginning to look uncertain. The smells were unlike anything they had ever experienced, and their predator instincts were responding despite their prejudices. Your cubs have natural talents that most species can only dream of, Elena continued. Their enhanced senses make them exceptional at this art. They can detect subtleties that others miss. Zeph stepped forward with a perfectly cooked piece of meat, seasoned with a blend he had created himself. Elder Gravik, he said formally, will you taste what we have learned? Gravik looked at the offering with suspicion and disgust, but he was also curious despite himself. The smell was incredibly appealing to his sensitive nose. This is a trick, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. If it is a trick, Elena replied, then it is one that brings joy instead of harm. What do you have to lose by trying one bite? Elder Gravik stared at the piece of perfectly cooked meat that Zeph held out to him. The young cub's claws trembled slightly, but his yellow eyes were steady and determined. The smell rising from the food was unlike anything Gravik had ever experienced in his long life as a hunter and warrior. This changes nothing, he said. But even as he spoke the words, his body betrayed him. His mouth watered. His stomach rumbled. His predator instincts responded to the incredible aromas in ways he did not understand. Please, Elder, Zeph said quietly. Just one bite. If you hate it, you can do whatever you think is right. But if you never try it, you will never know what we have discovered. The other adult Vasktar watched their leader carefully. Some of them were also clearly affected by the smells, though they tried to hide it. Others remained suspicious and hostile, gripping their weapons tighter. Gravik looked around at his hunting party, then back at Elena, and finally at the 3 cubs who had once been the shame of their families. There was something different about them now. They stood straighter. They looked confident for the first time in their lives. They had found something that gave them pride. Against every instinct and tradition he had followed for decades, Gravik reached out and took the offered piece of meat. The moment it touched his tongue, his world changed just as the cub's world had changed weeks earlier. The flavors exploded across his sensitive palate in waves of complexity he had never imagined possible. The meat was tender and juicy, but the seasonings added layers of taste that seemed to dance and play with each other. It was as if he had been eating food his entire life with only half his senses working. Gravik's eyes widened. his pupils dilated. For several long seconds, he simply stood there, experiencing flavors that had no names in his language. "This is," he began, then stopped. He took another small bite, trying to understand what was happening in his mouth. "This is incredible." The other adults shifted restlessly, surprised by their leader's reaction. Some of them stepped closer, their own curiosity beginning to overcome their suspicion. "How?" Gravek asked, looking at the cubs with new eyes. "How did you create this?" Kira stepped forward with another piece of meat she had prepared. "We learned to understand our ingredients," she said. "We learned that heat and time and seasoning can bring out flavors that are already there, just hidden." One by one, the other adults began to taste what the cubs had prepared. Each reaction was similar to Gravek's. Initial suspicion, followed by amazement, as they experienced cooked food for the first time. Elena watched the transformation with deep satisfaction. She had seen this happen before with other species, but never with predators as naturally aggressive as the Vasktar. "On my world," she said as the adults continued to sample the food, "we believe that sharing a meal is one of the most important ways to build understanding between different groups. When you eat together, you cannot be enemies. But we are warriors," one of the adults protested, though he was already reaching for another piece of the seasoned meat. "We conquer and dominate. We do not create things." "Why can you not do both?" Elena asked. "Your cubs have shown that the same skills that make a good hunter also make a good cook. Patience, timing, understanding of your prey, precision with tools. They have not abandoned their nature as Vasktar. They have discovered a new way to express it." Thane had been quietly preparing something special while the adults were eating. He approached his own father, who had barely spoken to him in weeks, carrying a bowl of soup he had made using techniques Elena had taught him. "Father," he said formally, "I made this for you. It uses the bitter root that grows in our sacred valley, but cooked in a way that makes it sweet instead of harsh." His father took the bowl suspiciously, but when he tasted it, his expression changed completely. The soup was rich and warming, with flavors that reminded him of his childhood, but somehow made better. "My son," he said slowly, "you did this?" "Yes, father. This is what I am good at. This is my gift." For the first time in his life, Thane saw pride in his father's eyes instead of disappointment. Gravik had been thinking while the others ate and talked. His mind was processing what he had experienced and what it might mean for his people. "Human," he said to Elena, "these techniques you have taught our cubs, could others learn them as well?" "Of course," Elena replied. "Cooking can be learned by anyone willing to practice and experiment. But your cubs have natural advantages. Their senses are much sharper than most species. They could become incredible chefs with proper training. And this brings satisfaction, fulfillment? It brings joy," Elena said simply. "It brings the pleasure of creating something beautiful and sharing it with others. It brings communities together instead of tearing them apart." Gravik nodded slowly. He was beginning to understand something important. "For generations, we have sent our young on the bloodmark trials," he said. "We have told them that the only way to prove their worth is through killing. But what if we have been wrong? What if there are other ways to show strength and skill?" The other adults looked shocked. Gravik was questioning traditions that had existed for thousands of years. "What are you suggesting?" one of them asked. "I am suggesting that perhaps strength comes in many forms," Gravik replied. "These cubs have found talents we never knew existed. They have created something that brings pleasure instead of pain, satisfaction instead of fear." He turned to face the three cubs directly. "You have shown me that being different does not mean being defective," he said formally. "You have found a new path that honors our gifts as Vasktar, while creating instead of destroying. I believe this path has value." Elena smiled as she watched the ceremony that followed. Gravek formally declared that the three cubs had passed their trials, not through killing, but through mastering a skill that required all the same qualities their people valued in hunting. The other adults agreed, somewhat reluctantly at first, but with growing enthusiasm as they continued to taste the incredible food. 3 months later, When Elena's rescue ship finally arrived, she found a very different situation than the one she had crash-landed into. The three cubs had become teachers themselves, sharing their knowledge with any young Vasktar who showed interest in learning. A new tradition had begun. The Flavor Mark Trials, where cubs could choose between proving themselves through hunting or through cooking. "Will you stay longer?" Zeph asked, as Elena prepared to leave with her rescue team. "There is still so much we want to learn." "1. I cannot stay," Elena replied. "But I will return. Your people have something special here. The galaxy should know about it." 6 months after that, the first interspecies restaurant on Zirion Prime opened its doors. It was run by 3 former defective cubs who had become master chefs, creating cuisine that celebrated both Vasktar and human traditions. Visitors came from across the galaxy to experience the incredible food and to witness the transformation of a predator species. Gravik often ate there, enjoying meals prepared by cubs who had once been the shame of their families. He had learned that true strength was not just about the ability to destroy, but also about the wisdom to know when creation was more powerful than destruction. And in the kitchen, 3 friends worked together, their claws now used for chopping vegetables, and their predator instincts focused on creating perfect flavors instead of planning perfect kills. They had found their true nature at last, and in doing so, they had changed their entire world.